Your pepper plants are dying in July and you don't even know why. Every single year, thousands of gardeners plant their peppers with high hopes in April, watch them explode with growth in June, and then watch that same plant collapse the second real summer heat hits. The leaves droop, the flowers drop off before they even open, and by August, that once thriving plant is basically just sitting there, doing nothing, while the calendar keeps burning through your one and only growing season. And here's the part that stings the most. It's not the heat that's killing your harvest. It's not bad luck. It's not your soil. It's you. It's 5 specific mistakes that almost every single pepper grower makes, and I guarantee you're making at least 2 of them right now without even realizing it. I've been growing peppers for 20 years. 20 years of trial and error. 20 years of dead plants, wasted seasons, and yes, plenty of embarrassing rookie mistakes that I made right alongside you. But somewhere along the way, I figured out exactly what separates a pepper plant that limps through summer from one that's still loaded with fruit the week before frost. And today, I'm handing you every single one of those lessons, the ones that took me 2 decades to learn the hard way, so you don't have to lose a single season figuring them out yourself. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why your peppers stall out in the heat, why they stop flowering even when they look healthy, and the one harvesting habit that's silently strangling your yield without you ever noticing. Stick around because mistake number 3 is the one that wrecks more gardens than anything else on this list, and almost nobody talks about it. Before we get into it, if you're serious about actually fixing your garden this year instead of just watching another video and forgetting it by tomorrow, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're growing and what's been going wrong with your peppers, because I read every single one, and some of the best fixes in this video actually came from questions gardeners like you asked me. All right, let's get into it. Mistake number 1 is something so common that I'd bet almost every single person watching this has done it, and it starts the moment you put that little transplant in the ground. There's this idea floating around, especially from people who also grow tomatoes, that you need to bury your pepper stem deep in the soil to build a bigger root system. Sounds smart, right? More buried stem, more roots, bigger plant. Except it's wrong, and it's wrong in a way that can actually set your plant back for weeks. Here's what nobody explains to you. Tomatoes and peppers are cousins, same nightshade family, but they are not twins, and they do not behave the same way underground. Tomatoes have this bizarre superpower where the stem itself is covered in tiny root nodes just waiting for moisture to activate them. Bury a tomato stem, and within days it's growing an entirely new layer of roots along that buried section. It's almost like the plant was designed to be planted deep. Peppers were not built that way. Bury a pepper stem thinking you're going to trigger the same explosion of roots and you'll get maybe 1 or 2 extra roots if you're lucky, right at the leaf nodes. That's it. You didn't supercharge the root system, you just wasted your own time. And worse, you may have actually put your plant at risk. Why risk? Because burying that stem does nothing beneficial in most cases, but it does keep more of the plant in constant contact with damp soil, which is exactly the environment fungal and bacterial pathogens love. So you took a step that felt productive, and instead you quietly increased disease pressure on your plant. Unless your seedlings got leggy and stretched out from weak light indoors, and you genuinely need to bury some stem just to keep them from snapping in the wind, skip it. Just set that root ball so the top of it sits flush with your garden soil. That's the move. But here's the mistake within the mistake, the part that actually causes real damage. Every experienced gardener knows you're supposed to strip off the lowest leaves on a pepper transplant before it goes in the ground. Good instinct. Those bottom leaves serve zero purpose once your plant is established, and they become a magnet for soil splash diseases the second it rains or you water too aggressively. But watch what almost everyone does wrong. They pinch those leaves off at the exact moment of transplanting, same day, sometimes same minute. And that creates open wounds on a stem that's about to get shoved into moist, microbe-rich garden soil in a high-humidity outdoor environment. You just built a doorway for infection and then walked your plant straight through it. Here's the fix, and it costs you nothing but a little patience. Pinch those lower leaves off 1 to 2 days before you transplant, while the plant is still indoors in a dry, controlled environment. Give those wounds time to callus over and seal up before that stem ever touches outdoor soil. It's such a small adjustment, but it's the difference between a plant that shrugs off transplant shock and one that's fighting off disease before it's even had its first real day in the ground. And that right there is just mistake number one. If you've been burying your stems deep or pinching leaves at the wrong time, don't panic, you're in good company, but fix it going forward. Because mistake number two is where things get expensive. And I mean that literally, because most gardeners are either starving their peppers or feeding them completely wrong. Think about it this way for a second. Would you expect a marathon runner to finish strong on a single granola bar eaten at the starting line? That's essentially what you're doing every time you drop a pepper transplant in the ground, walk away, and assume it'll take care of itself for the next 5 months. This plant is about to grow taller than your knee, load itself with dozens of fruit, and keep doing that through 95-degree heat. And somehow we expect it to run on whatever nutrients happen to already be sitting in the native soil. That's the trap. And it's a trap that feels reasonable, because peppers don't scream at you the way some plants do when they're hungry. They don't collapse dramatically overnight. They just quietly underperform week after week, and you never even realize how much harvest you left on the table. Everybody thinks of pepper plants as small. Cute little foot-tall bushes with a handful of peppers hanging off them. That mental image is costing you your harvest. A properly fed, properly grown pepper plant will blow past 3, even 4 feet tall in a single season and load itself down with fruit clear into fall. That kind of production takes fuel, real fuel, and most gardeners are feeding their peppers like they're some delicate little herb, instead of the heavy producer they actually are. Here's exactly what a pepper plant actually needs. And I'm going to give you the whole system because half measures get you half a harvest. First, and this is the most important piece of the entire puzzle, a balanced granular organic fertilizer, where all 3 numbers on that bag, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, are close together and reasonably strong. Something in the range of a 4-4-4 or a 5-3-3. This is not an instant fix. This is a slow release system that your soil's own bacteria and fungi need to break down over a couple of weeks before your plant can even use it. Think of it as feeding your soil first so your soil can feed your plant. It's a long game, and it's the single most important thing you can put down. Second, bone meal. This one gets overlooked constantly, and that's a mistake, because bone meal is loaded with phosphorus and calcium, and phosphorus is what actually drives flowering and fruiting. You can have the greenest, bushiest pepper plant on the block, but if it's not flowering, you're not eating. Bone meal pushes that bloom cycle. And that calcium content does something else critical. It helps prevent blossom end rot, that ugly black leathery patch that ruins fruit right when it's about to ripen. Combine consistent bone meal application with even watering, and blossom end rot becomes a problem you simply stop having. Third, and this is the one I consider almost a secret weapon, fish fertilizer. This stuff is already broken down through heat and fermentation, which means your plant can absorb it almost immediately after you water it in. It's nitrogen-rich, and it's what gives you that deep, dark green, thriving foliage that signals a genuinely healthy plant. This is your fast-acting insurance policy between the slow release of your granular fertilizer. Now, here's where I have to stop you, because this next part trips up more gardeners than almost anything else on this list. Nitrogen is not automatically good. If you dump too much nitrogen-heavy fertilizer on your peppers once they hit their blooming stage, you will get a big, bushy, dark green plant that produces almost no fruit at all. The plant puts all its energy into leaves and stems instead of flowers because that's exactly what you told it to do. So once flowering starts, you want to balance that fish fertilizer with something closer to an even ratio, so the plant redirects its energy toward blooming and fruiting instead of just getting bigger and leafier. There are 2 more pieces that are optional but worth knowing. If you're dealing with nematodes in your soil, and sandy soil regions deal with this constantly, Crab and lobster shell meal in the planting hole can suppress them. And if you're growing in containers where the soil microbiome is too limited to break down organic matter efficiently, a synthetic water-soluble fertilizer isn't the villain people make it out to be. Used correctly, at the right dose, it doesn't harm your soil, your plant, or your food. It's simply a targeted tool for correcting deficiencies fast or giving container plants what organic amendments alone can't provide quickly enough. The rhythm that actually works is this. Feed it transplant with your granular organic and bone meal worked into the top inch of soil around the base of the plant, then water it in with your fish fertilizer. Repeat that same routine every 2 weeks for the entire life of the plant, all the way from the day it goes in the ground until frost finally shuts things down in the fall. It doesn't need to be complicated and it doesn't need to be expensive. A small handful of granular here, a splash of fish fertilizer there, on a schedule you can literally set a reminder for. That's it. That's the entire system. Skip this, and you will watch your plants slow down, stall, and eventually stop producing right when they should be hitting their peak. And here's the cruel part. The plant won't look sick. It won't wilt or turn yellow in some obvious, alarming way. It'll just quietly plateau, fewer flowers, smaller fruit, slower ripening. You'll walk past it every day thinking everything looks fine, when really it's coasting on fumes. This single mistake, underfeeding a plant you assumed was a light feeder, quietly costs gardeners half their potential harvest every single year, and most of them never even connect the dots back to fertilizer. Now here's mistake number 3, and I want you to really pay attention here because this is the one that destroys more gardens in the middle of summer than anything else on this entire list, and it starts with a lie you've been told your whole gardening life. Every seed packet, every plant tag at the nursery, every gardening blog tells you the same thing. Plant your peppers in full sun. And it feels obvious, right? Peppers love heat, so obviously they must love blasting direct sunlight all day long. Except that logic falls apart the second you understand where pepper plants actually come from. They evolved in the dappled, filtered light underneath the canopy of subtropical forests. They are not a towering pioneer species standing tall and soaking up unfiltered sun all day. They are a small understory plant that adapted to grow in broken, partial light. Full, brutal, unbroken summer sun is not their natural habitat. It's an unnatural stress test. So why does everyone tell you full sun? Because in spring, when the sun is gentle and days are still short, full sun genuinely does help your transplants grow fast enough to catch up before frost season closes in. It's a necessary trade-off early on. But then July hits, the UV index climbs to 10, 11, 12, and that same full sun that helped your plants explode with growth in May starts absolutely cooking them in midsummer. You'll see it happen in real time. Afternoon wilting, flowers dropping before they open, fruit production grinding to a halt right when you expect your biggest harvest of the year, and most gardeners just assume it's the heat itself, some unavoidable force of nature. It's not. It's direct, unbroken sun exposure during the most intense weeks of summer, and it is completely preventable. And here's the part that really gets under my skin. Most gardeners see this happen and they blame the wrong thing entirely. They think their soil is bad. They think they're overwatering or underwatering, or that some disease is creeping in. They start dumping more fertilizer on a plant that's actually stressed from sun exposure, not hunger. They rip the plant out and replace it, assuming it was just a weak variety. Meanwhile, the actual problem was staring them in the face the entire time, and it had nothing to do with soil, water, or seed quality. It was simply too much unbroken sun for a plant that never evolved to handle it. Here's how you fix it, and there are a few different paths depending on your setup. If you can position your peppers where they catch full morning sun but get shaded by early afternoon, and eastern exposure typically does this perfectly, you get 5 to 6 hours of gentle morning light and skip the brutal afternoon blast entirely. If you're growing in containers, you have an even easier fix. Just move them into shade once the summer heat peaks, then move them back when it eases. That mobility is one of the biggest hidden advantages of container gardening that nobody talks about. If you've got a long growing season, Especially down in the deep south, you can plant directly under high dappled shade from the start, since you're not racing the clock to beat an early frost. But the technique that changed everything for me, the one single fix that had the biggest impact on my summer harvests, is shade cloth. You let your plants grow in full sun during the gentle spring months to maximize early growth, and then the moment that summer heat and UV index spike, you drop 40% shade cloth over them. Just like that, you've recreated the exact dappled light environment these plants evolved to thrive in. Wilting stops, blooming continues. Fruit production keeps rolling straight through the hottest, most brutal weeks of summer instead of grinding to a halt. If there's one single change from this entire video that's going to transform your harvest, it's this one. And almost nobody is doing it. All right, we're just getting started, because mistake number 4 is one that's actually being pushed online right now as if it's smart advice, and I need you to ignore it completely. There's a trend going around where people recommend hard pruning your pepper plants at transplant time, cutting them way back low, almost like you'd do with a young fruit tree, all in the name of getting a bushier plant. Here's why that's a genuinely bad idea for the vast majority of growers. Most of us are not transplanting until April or May, and most of us are hitting frost sometime in October or November. That gives you a 5 to 6 month window to grow, flower, fruit, and harvest. Hard pruning at transplant sets your plant back 3 to 4 weeks minimum while it recovers and regrows. You just voluntarily gave away a full month of your already limited growing season chasing a bushier shape that likely won't even matter by the time frost shows up. Here's something most gardeners never even consider, and it completely reframes how you should be thinking about your plants. In their native climate, pepper plants are actually perennials, not annuals. Perennials. They'll keep growing and fruiting for years, sometimes decades, if you never expose them to frost. I've got a jalapeno plant in my own garden that's over 2 years old right now, overwintered twice, and it's still one of my most productive plants in the whole garden, outproducing plants half its age. That single fact should change how you think about pruning entirely. You're not managing a plant on a race to complete its life cycle in one summer. You're managing a plant that thinks it has years ahead of it, and it's only our climate that forces it into that compressed 5 to 6 month sprint. Pruning has a place in that story, just not the place people online are pushing it. Prune. When you remove those lower leaves at transplant, we already covered why that matters. Prune off diseased foliage the moment you spot a fungal issue starting to spread before it takes over the whole plant. Prune hard if you're overwintering a plant in containers and want to rejuvenate it for another season. And prune in that brutal stretch of late July into August if your plants get beaten down and exhausted by extreme heat and you want a strong second wave of production heading into fall. Cut them back at that point, hit them with a strong dose of fertilizer, and they'll usually roar back to life with fresh blooms by early September, giving you fruit clear through to your first frost. But at transplant, when your plant is young and your season is already limited, leave it alone. Don't stump a plant that needs every single week of growing time you can give it. And now we're at mistake number 5, and this is the one that's the sneakiest of them all, because it doesn't look like a mistake at all. In fact, it looks like patience. It looks like you're just letting your peppers grow bigger before you pick them. But it's silently cutting your total harvest, sometimes by half or more, and almost nobody connects the dots. Your pepper plant only has so much energy to spread around at any given moment. It's simultaneously trying to grow new branches, push out new leaves, open new flowers, and ripen the fruit it's already carrying. Every single mature pepper hanging on that plant is actively pulling energy away from the plant's ability to produce new blooms. So if you let peppers sit on the vine, thinking you're just letting them get a little bigger, a little riper, you are actively robbing your plant of the resources it needs to keep flowering. The more fruit you leave hanging, the slower new flowers form. The slower new flowers form, the smaller your total harvest ends up being by the time frost finally shuts everything down. The fix here is almost stupidly simple, and that's exactly why so many gardeners overlook it. Harvest constantly. The moment a pepper hits that vibrant color you're looking for, whether that's a deep glossy green or a bright ripened red, pull it. Don't wait for it to get bigger. Don't wait for a few more to ripen at once so you can pick a big batch. Every single day or two that you leave a ready pepper hanging on that plant is a day you're stealing energy away from your future flowers and future fruit. And you'll know you've waited too long when peppers on the plant start to shrivel and lose that vibrant color. That's a fruit that's been dead weight on your plant for who knows how long, doing nothing but draining resources it desperately needs elsewhere. Pick relentlessly, and your plant responds by pushing out new flowers almost immediately to replace what you just took. It becomes a cycle. Harvest, bloom, over and over, all the way until frost finally ends the season. It's almost like the plant is designed to reward aggressive picking, because in a very real sense, it is. Every pepper you remove is a signal to the plant that there's room for more, energy freed up, a reason to keep pushing out flowers instead of settling into a slower, lazier pace. But that cycle only works if you're keeping your plant fed properly, because you're asking it to do more work, produce more flowers, and ripen more fruit than it would if you let it coast along at a slower pace. Go back to that fertilizing routine from mistake number 2, because heavy harvesting without heavy feeding will burn your plants out fast, and you'll end up trading one mistake for another. These 5 mistakes were never meant to be fixed in isolation. They work together. Feed properly, protect from harsh sun, transplant correctly, prune with intention, and harvest constantly. And you're not just avoiding 5 separate problems, you're building one complete system that keeps your plants producing from the day you transplant them clear through to the first hard frost. So there you have it. 5 mistakes. And if you're being honest with yourself, I'd bet you just recognized at least 2 or 3 of them in your own garden right now. Burying stems that didn't need burying. Underfeeding a plant you assumed was low maintenance. Blasting your peppers with full summer sun because that's what the plant tag told you to do. Hard pruning young transplants and losing weeks you didn't have to spare, letting peppers sit too long on the vine because you didn't realize you were quietly strangling your own harvest. I made every single one of these mistakes over my own 20 years growing peppers, and honestly, that's exactly why I wanted to make this video. I don't want you burning an entire season learning lessons I already learned the hard way for you. And here's the thing I really want you to sit with. None of these 5 fixes cost much money, and none of them require some rare skill or expensive setup. A little patience before transplanting, a consistent fertilizing schedule you can literally mark on a calendar, a cheap piece of shade cloth, restraint with the pruning shears at the wrong moment, and the simple discipline of walking your garden every couple of days with a basket in hand. That's the entire difference between a pepper harvest that fizzles out by August and one that's still handing you fresh peppers the week before your first frost. It was never about having a green thumb. It was about knowing which 5 things actually matter. If this actually helped you, do me a real favor. Hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach other gardeners who are about to make these exact same mistakes this season. Subscribe if you want more of this straight talk, no fluff, just what actually works. And I want to hear from you down in the comments. Which of these 5 mistakes have you been making without even realizing it? Tell me, because I promise you're not the only one, and your comment might be exactly what saves someone else's harvest this year. Thanks for watching, take care of those pepper plants, and I'll see you in the next one.